Bienvenue donc à cette journée d'échange
Welcome to this
et de
day of
rencontre donc
exchange
autour
and
de
meeting around
la question du
the
corps
question of
en
the
jeu
body,
dans
the
les
stakes
créations
of the body
chorégraphiques
in
in situ.
choreographic
Cette journée va commencer par un temps d'échange
creations in
autour de
site-specific
vos
choreography,
expériences et
with
de
starting
vos
with
pratiques avec
exchanges on
donc
your
des artistes
practices here with
invités que je vous
artists,
présenterai.
guests
Et
that I
ensuite, nous
will
aurons
introduce
une
shortly.
proposition donc
And
de
then we will
pratique
propose a
pour mettre en
practice
pratique ce
to
que
put
nous allons
into
aborder
practice what
pendant
we are
cette
going to
matinée
talk about
d'échange.
this morning.
Donc cette discussion
In this
intervient dans le cadre de l'événement
discussion,
Via les ailleurs,
we will
organisé
see
par
this is organized
VIADANSE,
by Via les
Centre
Ailleurs,
chorégraphique
organized
national
by the National
Bourgogne Franche-Comté
Choreographic
à Belfort.
Center in Belfort.
Via les ailleurs est un événement qui
Via
fait
les
partie de la
Ailleurs is
saison
part of the
Culture Africa2020.
Africa 2000
La discussion est
Culture
retransmise
Season.
en
It's
direct sur la plateforme
direct live
CDCN
on the CDCN
dans le
Live
cadre du
platform
festival
within the
BIPOD 2021
BIPOD
et de son
2021
événement
festival,
Architecture
and
d'un
it's a
corps en
festival
ruine, qui
Architecture
rassemble
of
des
a Body in
organisations
Ruins,
culturelles de 8 pays
presenting
différents d'Europe et
organizations
de
from
la
8
Méditerranée,
different European
dont
and
nous saluons
Mediterranean
également
countries.
toutes les personnes qui sont en
And
train
we say
de
hello
nous
to
regarder
all the
actuellement.
people who are
Donc moi je me
watching
présente pour
us at
commencer, je suis
present. So
Frédéric Seguette,
I'll
je vais
start
donc
with
être le
introducing
modérateur
myself.
de
I'm
cet
Frédéric
échange.
Seguette. I'm the
Je
moderator
suis le
for this
directeur du
exchange.
dancing
I'm the director
CDCN,
of the
Centre de
dancing
développement
of the
chorégraphique
National
national
Center for
Dijon,
Choreographic Development
Bourgogne-Franche-Comté.
of Dijon,
Voilà. Et nous avons donc
Burgundy, Franche-Comté. And so we have
trois invités, trois
three
artistes,
guests,
interprètes et
three
chorégraphes
artists, interpreters,
que je vous
and
présente.
choreographers that I
Anne
introduce
Le
now.
Batard.
Anne Le Batard.
Bonjour Anne.
Hello Anne.
Lassina Koné.
Lassina, Koné. Hello.
Et Mohamed Fouad.
And Mohamed Fouad.
Bonjour.
Avant de partager
Before
vos
we start sharing experiences and practices, I will give some information about your paths, your curriculum, and we'll go back on that. So, Anne, you're the furthest away, but we were working close together, and you started dancing like many people by taking classes and by being an interpreter with choreographers. But in 1994, you create a collective called Ex-Nihilo, and from this project you will develop actions in public spaces, in site-specific choreographies throughout the world. Your biography is impressive. We'll go back to that. And you also teach and practice, and you transmit the pieces of the company throughout the world also. So a lot of experience to share. Lassina, you come from Mali. You developed and created a training course called The Body in the 22nd Century, and you developed dance residences in marketplaces in Bamako, Mali, and a very strong experience, we can imagine. And Mohamed Fouad, you are Egyptian. You started dancing in Egypt, in Cairo, and you worked with many choreographers as an interpreter, dancer, and for the past years you have been developing projects in Cairo with a collective, Cal 40, that you will present us. This is a very brief, short presentation of these artists. We will now exchange on these rich experiences that you have. So now I will ask you a few questions. Anne, you have a quite academic path experience, dancing classes in dancing studios with creations, in theaters, international presentations. And in 1994, you create this collective which will develop projects in public spaces, a collective which gathers artists which go from visual arts to music to and in 1997, you focused the project on dancing in site-specific dancing. So my first question is, what brought the change from dancing in comfortable places like the comfort to the complexity of site-specific dancing. The complexity of dancing in public spaces was not my motivation, but it's something that we discover when we grow into this experience. But for me, the first desire I had was to go and meet, to get out of these dancing studios in which we spend a lot of time, and to be in direct contact with reality, with daily life, with a look of other publics. And it was a wish that intuitively brought us to work, to go outdoors and see what happened. And yes, as we made progress in this, the complexity of public spaces appeared to us. But 27 years after, it has opened us to a field of working both artistically, how we can consider places, place the dancing in an area, and after that into site-specific areas or natural areas, and also it's a going deep down into the otherhood, in otherness. We met in every country, we always met the people who live in the streets or work in the streets. So every meeting in each new country is a meeting with people with their specific paths who don't necessarily go to theaters to see dancing or to see a play. And from a human point of view, it nourishes us, it feeds us. There's a difference between the way you move and you change in your perception of the others, and it changes the artistic approach. What is outside also brings you to work on different forms of presentations. The public is constantly there compared to our traditional theater dancing. Is this passing permanent, or do you have projects which bring you back to the theater, to classical venues? Because we could imagine there could be an interest in bringing back projects that went through outside experience to share it with other publics. At least the experience of working outdoors was final in the Ex-Nihilo project, because it's our way of work, our place of inspiration. So even if some projects were presented indoors, the indoors are always reconsidered. Even the theater, the first time we went back into a theater, we completely put it upside down. What is definite, what is final is to consider the place as the main partner of our work. And this relationship, this triangle relationship, the place where we invest, where we go, the specific look that we want to have with the public, which means that even if we go back indoors, we very rarely go back on a stage. It's a different way of writing. Yeah, that, at least for Ex-Nihilo's work, our work, there's a final definite place in our approach of the construction of a piece. And is Marseille also a trigger? Because after Marseille, your project opens to the Mediterranean, and then you go to Latin America and Korea. But the origin of the project being in Marseille, did it contribute to the extension of the project on a broader territory? Yeah. Marseille enabled us, gave us the freedom. It's my home town, city. I know it well, and it's a place that has a lot of flaws, like, for example, an absence of urban planning or civil behavior, but it opens a lot of fields of possibilities. And I think in Ex-Nihilo, we immediately started working without asking ourselves the questions of authorizations, knowing if it was legally possible or not. And I think that was a major point, because the fact of being outside a whole day, changing spaces, if, for example, we disturbed being able to change, it was not a constraint. On the contrary, it opened the space. Then, of course, there's a call to traveling, but when we think about it afterwards, there's something of this kind, this relationship to the game, playing with the rules, going around the rules and regulations, and even now, even with a COVID, we can still quite easily work outdoors in Marseille, for example, within a frame of negotiation, of course, but without worrying about these constraints. So I'll make a link between Marseille and Cairo. Fouad, you originally come from Cairo. You started working there, following training, and then you left. You went to study and dance with companies throughout the world, prestigious festivals, and then you also developed projects in Cairo in public spaces, site-specific choreographies. There's this political dimension, of course, highly political in Egypt, to dare a choreographic gesture in public space. Was it a question of occupying public space? Because at that moment when you develop projects, society, Egyptian society is under great change. What were the stakes of being a choreographic artist in Cairo at that moment?
So first of all, I come from Alexandria. It's another city. And then I moved to Cairo for dancing, because it's a little bit more opportunities there. So there was it's more the scene. But when I started to work in public spaces, it was 2011 for the first time, and it was in Alexandria during a festival called Nassim El-Raqs. And it's site-specific festival, and for me it was like the first experience that I was asked to create a performance, and it was like site-specific, more like not in public space, but kind of semi-public space, you can say. And at this moment, it was 2011. It was right after the revolution, so in a way it was a big thing. It was the moment also that we were questioning a lot of things, especially art, as the role of art in such an event happening around. And in fact, being in public space, doing, we can say, unusual action, whatever it is, dancing or whatever, it never done before. That was new at this moment. So the revolution, it was like people took over the public spaces, because we had something that we call, like in Arabic, called when you say like it's not your business what I'm doing, you say أنا في شارع الحكومة, like I'm in the street of the state. So people were always thinking that the street, it's not belong to them, it belonged to the state. And it's, for me, I noted something also, when you go to Egypt, when you go to a house of a family, inside the house it's super clean. They really care a lot about the house is super clean, but the garbage, they could throw it from the window easily. Yeah. So I see it, like this behavior, it's a little bit weird, but in a way, you can see it's type of you threw the garbage to the street because it's not yours. And then after the revolution, this is changed because people took it over. So at some point, as an artist, to be in public space and to dance in public space, it's a statement. And it's also like the body is a, according to the society, the body is a taboo. And doing an action in public spaces also it's something not completely acceptable. So for me it was a challenge to do it, and I was excited doing it. And through the festival, because I participated to the all editions from 2011 until 2018, I developed also I developed myself inside for understanding what it means public spaces, and also through my experience in dance in general, that we don't have like a dance academy, or there is no like an official frame to learn dance. So we used to learn by ourselves, or by you work on yourself, or trying to find a workshop somewhere, and then you work on yourself. So in a way, it's self-development process. So you learn while doing the thing. So the same thing for me while participating to this festival as a choreographer or as a dancer, I developed myself in understanding what it means to work in public spaces. Because it's, for me, when you are in public spaces, it's not like you dance in theater. For me, it's about hosting. When you are in theater, it means you are hosting the audience in the space well prepared. You prepare everything. You prepare the light, you prepare the sound, the chairs are clean, everything is prepared for the audience. But when you go out to the street, you are the guest. And you are in a public space. You are interacting with the public, and you're interacting with the whole architecture and the whole movement around.
Tu parles d'invité, d'être invité.
Oui. A guest, I'm not sure that you are expected, you are waited for in public space. A public is expected in a theater, but in a public space he's not expected, he's not waited for. He's considered a stranger in this public space. And all the work is to create a relationship, an acceptance, a sharing of this space when you talk about being a guest, I suppose.
And in fact, regarding also the performing arts in general, performing arts, it's the art of the moment at the end. Even if you are in theater and everything is prepared very well, and you work like 100 of years on a piece, at the end there will be the moment, like this 1 hour. We never know what will happen in this 1 hour. So at the end, it is the moment. And in public spaces, it's really the moment, because you are part of the whole ambience and the whole sounds. There is a music and there is movement. So you are part of. Yes, you are. Like you bring the art in the public space, you invite people, but you have to understand also that you are invited by them. It's like, it's two ways. It goes the two ways. So in a way, for me, it's kind of, it's a kind of invitation. You invite them to see art, and you go to them. And at the same time, they are hosting you at this spontaneous moment in life. So it's like, for me, it's the meeting between the moment, and it is the core of performing art, and the art itself comes to as kind of unusual behavior in the public spaces.
This moment that you are talking about, this moment could be sudden, with all the risks that are represented, but it could be also anticipated. And now I will talk with Lassina, because you, Lassina, in your residential project, you developed working in marketplaces in Bamako, Mali. All this time of preparation of meeting is at the heart of your product. The residences is also to enable the artist to make contact and links with the people who will see the finality. Can you talk about these experiences? Yeah, the festival Falikeli Bamako, it's the festival of God solo we decided to do in the marketplaces in Bamako. So there's the excitement of working in public spaces and all that we cannot find in rooms and what we can appropriate in public spaces. And then there are other political problems, which is access to culture. The government-subsided spaces, there are a few, like the French Institute in Bamako, where the population can come and see the work of the artist in the theater. But Mali is, let's say, a poor country, and there's not necessarily an economy around culture. So the idea of coming with dancing in marketplaces is one. Everywhere I am, where I discuss with dancers on their story and how they came to dancing and problems in the family, it's always the same thing that comes out. My dancing is not recognized as a work. People say dancing is not a job. So I asked myself the question, when do I see that what the person does is a job, is a work? The artist creates in rooms, in theaters, so it's creating outside of what the population sees. So the idea is to demystify the population, enable the population to see the creation process from beginning to end. Not only they will give their opinion, they will say if the job of a dancer is a real job, and it's also preparing the politicians of tomorrow, because I say that within 15 or 30 years, these children who are in the marketplace every day or in other public spaces, who see the work, the creation process of the artist to the end, they have an idea of what the thing is, of what dancing is. They are informed, they are educated, and when they become when they have a place, a political responsibility, they will be able to fund culture, which doesn't exist presently, because right now the people who are in power don't know what art is, what culture is, and you can't buy something that you don't know if it exists. So you enable the population to have access to contemporary creation, and the dancer as an artist in society. What can I question in my society, and my artistic work must be for whom, and what do I want to develop in my society? And starting from all these questions that we decided to put the festival in the marketplaces, and the marketplace is still the center of life. Wherever you are, you have to go to the marketplace. It's the only place where you can do what you want, you can behave as you want, you can play the parts that you want. And for us, you know, people are going to look at you, and nobody is going to automatically judge you. It's a place that's the most important for me in society. What is impressive when we listen to you all, the concerns, you know, in all the geographic differences, cultural differences, the questions are the same. There's the question of the places. We're going to public spaces because theaters are missing. There's the visibility of creation and the artist. And yes, by being present in public spaces, it's also to make visible the creation process, the place, the question of the place of the artist in society. Each context, of course, is different. You have unique experiences, but these problems are, in the end, throughout the world, the same. And So when you go throughout the world, when you carry your experiences to other spaces, when you share these experiences with other artists, what can you transmit? With Anne yesterday we were talking, it's for 20, 30 years you've been developing projects in public spaces, and every time it's a new adventure. It's a new place of work. There's, of course, a know-how and experience and tools, but every time each context requires a new type of imagination. There are new stakes. So what can you transmit about choreographic creation in public spaces? What do we transmit? Well, of course, I would say after 27 years of experience, it's being attentive to the outside. It's decentering dancing and telling oneself that contrary to working in a studio. Lassina, you were saying something. Yes, this desacralizing the artistic act. Outside, I insist on the fact that there's a part of your brain that is dedicated to the environment, to the other, to the users, to all that doesn't belong to what you are going to propose to offer, and to be entirely in the dance, and how you have an inside-outside interiority, outside exhibiting. It's something that on which I insist very much, because as you say, we have shared experiences. In any case, if I can go to the marketplaces in Bamako, I will take the same time, the necessary time for me to feel inside within this space and to be interacting with it. And this idea of being completely in the act of dancing. In the 80s, we were very, dancing was sacred. It took 3 hours to prepare. Here, it's not that. It's what Fouad was saying. It's in the instant, in the moment. In the moment, I'm completely a dancer. I give the maximum. But at the same time, I look at you and I speak. There is something that we intuitively implemented, which was, in fact, we talk, we stop dancing and we talk. If we feel there is a question around us or somebody who is disturbed, there's this thing, I would say, on which now I insist very much. You're talking about dancers. You are a dancer. What is the place of the woman in the public space, of the woman dancer, of the woman choreographer? Well, further to our conversation of yesterday evening, I was thinking of what I told you yesterday, that to the fact of going outside, outdoors. In studios, we're dancers, there's no gender. We're just bodies. There's an abstraction. When I say there's no gender, I mean going outdoors, outside, the meaning of the body is immediate. I am outside, I am a woman or I am a man. I am a man or a woman lying down. And when I was talking about a sort of censorship that I had, in fact, it's more the fact of considering immediately that outside I will only be a woman. I can mask myself, I can wear a mask, but I must go with it, and be affirmative in my presence. But in this consideration of where am I, by going through different cultures and countries, of course, the first time that we went beyond the Mediterranean and we danced in Marrakesh, this relationship to the look of men was, of course, huge, because, of course, the street was mainly male. And then there's the question of finding the right place, the right position. It's claiming the female presence, pushing barriers, but within a limit of acceptance. Acceptance up to a respect of a body that can tell dancing, show images that can be at least that can be a cultural reference, which are out of the ordinary. In Ex-Nihilo dancing, we go very much on the ground. We like confrontation and duos, but we want all this to speak what we want to tell. Shock, certainly, but trying not to have a somebody rejecting us, definitely rejecting us. That would not be interesting. That's what I'm... Okay, back to our exchange yesterday. Lassina, you mentioned an experience with female dancers in the marketplace in Bamako. It makes you smile. I think it's important because, of course, we have the experience of Anne. Yesterday you were talking about censorship. To go back to the explanation of being yourself aware of what the presence of a woman could generate, to measure the presence, the identity, let's say, of a woman in this public space. In what you said, Lassina, there were reactions which were that also had a part that impacted on your project, so that at the end the reactions were in the end reactions of cooperation with the project. Can you tell us a few words about this? Yeah. During the festival, there are two girls that were dancing a duo in the marketplace on a bridge, and as I told you yesterday, the first thing that a man said to this woman is, "What are you doing? Are you going to get married?" And he told them off, really. He was shouting. He was an old guy, and as I said at this moment, it's because there are two girls. If it was a girl and a woman and a man, it would have changed. But these two girls dancing under the tutorship of a Senegalese, you see, hey, what are you doing with this Senegalese guy here? There's all of this mixed together, and so the first day, second day, the girls were not feeling well because considering the way they were looked at, seeing two girls dancing with one guy saying, "What are you doing? Go get married. You should be married and stay at home." And so as time went on, the Senegalese guy, who it's Arboka, the choreographer, he passed in front of the guy who was selling hats. He bought a hat and he said, "What is your name?" He says, "My name is Fufana." And so 3 days later, he was hiding in his little hole. I started looking what was happening, the evolution of the dancing, and after 1 week he got closer and the girls got closer, and in discussion he asked the question, "But what are you doing? What happened for you to come and dance here instead of going to get married?" And so the girl explained her history. "I am the daughter of a dancer and a musician, and I am a musician with Shaka Bouya, and this man knew Shaka when he was a child." So they connected. There was a connection. And as time went by, the girls, he was inspired. At 6 o'clock, you know, the women take brooms to clean the street, so he wanted to integrate brooms in the dancing. So the man made the brooms, and so the title of the piece was "The Obstinate Children." And so there is a sort of hill where kids climb and then slide down. So this old man became their sonographer. He explained how to hold and slide. So From this moment on, the question that I asked myself is, what is a foreigner? What is a stranger? What is the relationship with the other? When do I accept the other in my space? It's time. It's the time that I spend with the other, the time that I take with the others to meet the other, to share the same space. It is this time which changes everything. It's habit. It's our habit which becomes our tradition, and this habit I find is super important, very interesting. Take time to put things squarely. Another aspect is in every space that you've been through is all the constraints, the obstacles, but also motive forces, regulations, security regulations, rules. We can imagine that dancing in public space is easy because walking is easy, everybody does it, so dancing should be easy. But no, in fact, it's not. There are many more constraints in a public space than in a theater, so there are a lot of approaches that can be obstacles for the creation. Lassina, you were also telling us about the relationship that you must weave on site with the people who are present in the sites. We're used to working with institutions to get authorizations. The authorization to be in public spaces is part of what we must do regularly. There, again, it's a question of taking the time, of long time work, slowly bringing the presence of dancers and the look of spectators and passers-by, and also the administrative authorization to work in these open spaces. Can you give us a few elements on that? Yeah. The authorization for me in Bamako, there's of course the authorization, you have to go see the mayor of the place where you are, but in the end, the space, it's not the mayor who decides in the end. He's the first one in charge, of course, but there's always someone in the area who's really in charge. And you have to see this person and get that person's authorization. And when you miss that person and you go too far up in the administration, it can not work for you because that person at the local level would think, hey, I'm the one people go and see, and then I call the mayor and I tell him it's okay. Whereas here, he feels missed out. Yeah, you have to find the right person to whom you ask the authorization. Exactly. And what is interesting as time goes by is, in the end, what I noticed, what is super interesting is that if the population, if you imply them from the beginning of the process, it takes time. You have to see this person who tells you you have to see that person, this head of family. They are the ones who will appropriate themselves with a project. And that is interesting in this process. It takes time, but it's how you invite all of these people for them to empower themselves to appropriate this project in public space, and it becomes their thing. You bring the idea of working in their space and showing them something, but the approach in the end enables them to appropriate, to empower themselves, and they are more 100% implied. And in general, you invite them, of course, to come and watch the work that you are doing, but with time, they will invite their friends and the people in the neighborhood to come and see the artistic work where they are. Yes, there's the question of long time work. It's really a priority, it's essential, and we battle for the institutions that take this into account. It's a struggle, in fact. Yesterday in our exchanges we were saying that with Anne that dancing, the choreographic movements, gestures have all the potentials to be deployed in public space. It is probably the art which is the closest to this game of problems related also to language, perhaps also to physical availability of playing with all grounds, backgrounds. Public space, as Fouad says, is also a whole of events that you do not master, that you don't control, contrary to the theater where everything is controlled. At least that's what the project is about. In public space we don't, the weather, an accident, a group, the police, yes, as you were saying, yeah. Dancing can also use the space, play with the space without having to amplify voices because there's no text playing differently. All of these characteristics are specific to dancing. Perhaps you could talk about this very much, your experience in this field. Even if you, Fouad, you started by being an actor in theater, right? You were first an actor, weren't you, Fouad?
No, I studied theater and I did some theater stuff, but I could not consider myself as an actor because I did like physical theater a little bit, but it was more dancing, like from the very beginning. I studied theater because there is no, I couldn't study dance because it was not possible. So I started with theater, and during my studies, I knew that contemporary dance for the first time, like I didn't know before, and then I said like, okay, this is my job. I could say like I used some theatrical scales in dance without trying to not be very theatrical also because it's not working that much, but I could use also the theatrical scales because it's helping a lot.
Dancing, but also all sorts of physical practices. Walking, for example, of course, it's part of the directions of choreographic gestures in site-specific situations. Lassina, you also did a lot of walking in your performances, in your site-specific performances. It's very present in everyday life of everybody, walking, demonstrating also the experience, walking in a space. It's also experimenting a space, inviting the public to walk with dancers, is accompanying them also in this experience. Perhaps could you talk about these experiences, perhaps, that you have, Lassina or Anne, experience that you had on this type of project of bringing a public, because we can think about proposals that set a performance in space and a peripheral public, or even a moving public that passes by without stopping because they're not interested. But there are some projects which will bring people elsewhere, that will offer interpretations of the spaces where they are, where they live. Do you have experiences in those fields? Many, I suppose. Yeah, I'd say, yeah, working outside, we had shapes. We're talking about this story of shapes at the beginning. It's among going outside is eliminating the stage. So here you see we have a wonderful horizon. We have the question of the view, the way people can look, seeing the punctuation of the bodies in an environment. But as we were talking about this also for the workshop this afternoon, it's considering that as we are outside, we have this attention, being attentive to all of the elements. It's walking, it's the body of the dancer in the flow. I was talking about freedom, but it's extreme mobility dancing. It's the advantage, I would say, if there's a space which is the combination of action and the spectators moving, as we constantly readapt, there's a possibility of going on and looking at a space that the dance reveals. I would say that among, you were talking about transmission. One of the things that I find very beautiful and which appears is that at one time the dancer becomes the pretext to see the environment differently, to transform. You were talking about the market. In the notion of neighborhood relationship, there's this presence which is going in a given time, in respect, in a meeting. It is going to modify the space for one given time and imprint itself in memory, because generally this duration, this time and this meeting, you as a dancer, I'm thinking about Belzin's district in Marseille. We did one immersion, that's what we call it now. We stayed 6 months in this district. Now I no longer go in this district without remembering the moment where everything moved because of 4 of our presences every day, where we danced 2 hours in the flow. And it's true that in fact, the absence of stage and refusing the stage, refusing in a certain way to have the public around you to determine a stage, but when you invite the public to make a step aside or take a certain distance and saying, are you looking at me? I'm a dancer, but look all around you. There's something behind you. Everything is interacting. It's a relationship to being humble, our place, our position, without going into the heavenly considerations. The humbleness and fragility of bodies have an immense power in an environment. That's what I find interesting. We continue the story because when there's something fragile, when fragility generates extreme power, it's so strong, it's irreplaceable as an experience. So I'll use the term scenery that you've used. Of course, there's the question of scenery, environment, view, the trace, and strata, layers. One of the layers is the memories inhabiting this place when we see a performance, when we've been through a performance in a certain space. It still vibrates of these ghost presences, and it's also the question of reappropriation, what Lassina was saying, how acts, choreographic gestures also invite the publics, the users, the passers-by to dare perhaps invest the spaces differently and to reappropriate, re-empower themselves with these spaces. It's the place of dancing, but also the place of each person there in a space which is void of any collective action, just passers-by passing from one place to another. Yeah, it's true. There's a relationship to, we talked about this, sometimes a forgotten space, because the architecture was not well thought, or as you say, Fouad, I'm thinking of Zegad Emanur, who was saying, the trash was thrown through the windows. Seeing a dancer in these spaces, or artist, I'm saying dancer because this is the topic today, it's true that it's a story that it's quite a regular story. You give new value to the inhabitants, to the direct neighbors. You give a new value to their space. I have this experience, we all have this kind of experience at the bottom of a building in Alexandria where we went for 3 consecutive years. The first time there was a lot of flow at the bottom of this building. It was quite a dirty building, sort of abandoned, forgotten. Yeah, it's the bottom, it's the ground floor and everybody doesn't care. And the second year when we arrived, there were trees that had been planted. The trash cans had disappeared, and as the projects developed, as the Nassim Anrak project developed, the ground floor of this building evolved. It was reconsidered by the inhabitants, and to their eyes, it took a new value. It's not a mission in itself, but it's always extremely interesting to see how we can have this capacity in a city, in a place which is forgotten, abandoned, that people don't look out, see how it gives a new value to that place. And I think we all have experiences of the same kind and which remain. I haven't been to Alexandria for a long time, but I imagine that, this is a human story. The art is a pretext to bounce back on the everyday life. Yeah, so it's going to be time to reappropriate and exchange with the public to, of course, continue this sharing of experiences. So, if you wish to ask questions or make remarks on what you've just heard, yeah, I have, listening to you, I was thinking of this permanent representation in which you are when you invest public space. There's not what we know in a studio, in a theater, what you're saying, Fouad. The public arrives at a given time. When you go in a site-specific situation, you are immediately in representation. There are passers-by, there may be people at the windows. How does this writing of the unpredictable, of this, how do you manage, what are your strategies between not the rehearsals, but adapting, preparing, and the moment when there is the representation? I'm very intrigued by this, of how you manage if you're there 1 week, 1 day, early in the morning. How do you organize work so that at one moment, as an interpreter, dancer, musician, you are in the representation, the show? Depends of the forms, I would say. I'll take one example. We had one show, 2 hours, 4 dancers in the flow of. We integrated the fact that we wanted the flow to continue, and our stakes was to, for the public, not to disturb the public that we invite, not to disturb the flow of the passers-by. What is easy is that you have to flee the spectators who are going to go around you, to send them back to the interaction with the city. And the second part was a piece with 10 dancers where it would, with a 360-degree vision, there when the public arrives, there's no interaction with the real aspect of the city. So these are 2 shows, one where the public will be around, which is restaging the representation on City Tragic. I loved our preparations in spite of the loud music on a passing space. We had this fantastic magic of people walked through our game area without sometimes even noticing that they were in the middle of a rehearsal, which surprised me very much always. And there, as we constantly rehearsed in this situation, because every day we rehearsed and people were passing by, there is this type of attentiveness so that you become attentive to this. It's a question of, you were mentioning transmission, how to be permanently attentive to the fact that there can be something that a person who passes by without necessarily using or that person, integrating that person in the show, but just considering feeling secure and safe and securing the pedestrian also. But you see what I mean? There are moments that are different, in fact. The moment of the show in the festival, for me, the interaction with the city is, for me, it's a different interaction with the city. And then there is the moment of work, of rehearsal, where it's this attention to, I would say, considering that we are in volume. Yeah, the work that we do generally today in Mali is more residences in spaces. For example, the festival was a 3-week residential in the marketplaces where they rehearsed every day for 3 weeks. And very recently, we launched a call on applications, and there was a 2-month residential for 2 months in the village of Bancoumana, where our structure is located. Today, what we try to do more or less, it's not only to come and dance and express ourselves in space, but it's how to work every day in space, and also with the problems of conventional spaces in space, and all the work we do in the residences and public space. It's looking for a model. What model, what space can we create for contemporary dancing in Africa, taking Mali as a laboratory, a test laboratory from these creation residences in site-specific situations. That's where the shows are prepared. But during the preparation, we made a mistake. We invited the public to come and see the show in a marketplace. So it was crowded. There were too many people. So in the end, it was very disturbing. And for the next edition, it will be a residence in the marketplace. But this time, we will not invite anybody to come and watch. People see the creation as they pass by, so it's more asking in advance, 1 week in advance before the end. It's 1 week of presentation, so people can come and see the show. Because afterwards it becomes a problem, because the idea is to not disturb the space, not disturb the people who are working in that space, in that marketplace. If you become a problem for the people working in that space, it's tough. It's tough. Fouad, do you want to say something?
Yeah, okay. For me, in fact, for the working in public spaces, it's all about, you know, the ability, the natural ability of adaptation, that you can adapt yourself. Everyone can do it, I guess. So in a way, as an artist, as a dancer, when you go to public space, it's really about to adapt your body according to the environment, and regarding the whole environment around. It's all positive in a way, because even you are not prepared for anything, when you know that it will be a lot of surprises. Everything is spontaneous. So in a way, when we work a lot. For me, it's about being open and listening more than writing. And you are creating. Yes, you come with something that you know what you're gonna do, what you want to say, which statement that you want to put on the table here or in the street over there. So, but at the end, you have to keep it open and flexible. And it's about the ability of adaptation. At the end, you have to adapt your body in the space and the environment around.
I will also bounce back on what was said. I think there's sometimes the exceptional dimension of a festival which will gather a lot of people, and the artist will stay at a certain distance from society, let's say, and projects which are in a daily life and which will create a different space, a different type of relationship. And yes, as you say, adapting how the offer will integrate the complexities, the uses of the space, not to harmonize, but let's say not to create an event because it's exceptional, but on the contrary, to find its place in that space and move things progressively, bit by bit. Both are interesting, in fact. It's not one against the other. They are two very different approaches and two different approaches. Yeah, and moments. I would say that the official meeting with the public in within a festival, it's something else. Yes, it's a different moment. It has its own value, but arriving with no rehearsal, even within a festival, being in a space where you've never been, where you've never worked. It's also a relationship with the inhabitants, with the users. There's this need. We often ask this since the beginning of our projects. The first thing we act is rehearsal time, saying it's absolutely necessary, but it's not only to rehearse for the dancers, of course that's necessary, but it's also that moment where we meet, even if it's very short, the inhabitants, the people who are there, and to know that this guy always drives his car out of the garage at the same time every day. So when we know that we readjust, so this preparation time, even if it's short, is absolutely necessary to just for that meeting with the environment and the people in that space. As Fouad said, the fact of being a guest and inviting, but when we're in the street, we're necessarily in somebody's place. Somebody who's appropriated their ground floor of the building, their square, the little garden. It's more their space than ours, so we have to adjust. But it's true that meeting with a framework of the festival, which sometimes asks you to be concentrated in a city center, sometimes you would love to go out of that frame. You know, these are the dreams of a dancer. It's to have what you said. It's the permanent show for 3 days in a town where things appear, disappear. Right now, you cannot consider this right now for the moment, but yeah, it would be pushing these constraints, getting rid of these constraints would be one extra step in the experience. Other questions? I'd like to know the use of the using of music or no music in the rehearsals or in what happens. Music is from our point of view, our experience, as soon as there are musicians, we are disturbed. There's the problems with the neighbors. It's strange, but that's the way it is. What I told you yesterday, a dancer can dance. the fragile body of a dancer can be permanent, but not everybody likes the same music, so immediately it creates a volume, a sound space which is far more present for the passers-by, the inhabitants, and there we talk about nuisance. We don't talk about nuisance of the bodies in the city, but we talk about nuisance of the sound in the city. Unfortunately for our live musicians, but we try to reduce their rehearsal time. It can be okay without a problem, but sometimes we do have issues. Yes, and there are other projects meeting these problems with earphones. Have you developed these projects with earphones, and what are the limits or the assets of using earphones? No, we never use this. As a spectator, I sometimes saw this. I love the silent discos. What is that? Silent disco is at the end of a festival that has its main space in the middle of the town. Well, you have disco music with 3 DJs blasting all that in earphones, so people can dance throughout the night, and there's no nuisance in the neighborhood because it's all in the earphones, and there are funny interactions. But in the audio, in the relationship to audio, there are interesting things, but there's a distance which is created. I had a bad experience with projects that I had in called poor areas or living more intimate areas, and arriving there isolated as a spectator, I didn't always like that much. And Fouad, what about you? Have you developed this, had this experience of projects with earphones?
Yeah, I did like something like that in my last solo, but it was like it's a part of the performance, part of the one scene of the performance, but it made like one-to-one performance. Like it was like a private show for one of the audience because it's an interaction. It's an interactive performance. But for the music in public space, for me, because the public space, it's already there is a music. I mean, like when we add, for me, when I add something to the environment, so I have to consider the whole sounds around because there is already music. Personally, when I do something, I prefer to have like minimal music. If it's always like without too much microphones or speakers, it's more like acoustic, like a violin or something. Like if I add something, but I love always to use the sound of the environment.
Lassina? Well, first of all, I can share my experience when I'm working in public space. I don't master the music, I don't control it, because there's the question of when do I choose this space to express myself? What attracts me? What inspires me? That's the first question. And personally, when I make performances in chosen public spaces, I don't bring music. During residences, there is a meeting time which is different. Then you have to go and see the space that you've chosen. Take the time before you start working. Study the space. It can take 3 days. It can take 1 week if you need it to really become aware of everything around you in that given space. Because when you choose a space, it's not by luck. It's no luck if you choose this space and not that one to express yourself. So there's a relationship. Of course, it depends. We generally invite people to come to public spaces. It depends on the choice of the artist. But personally, I rarely use music when I am in a public space. I think about 6 months or a year ago, we were fortunate to meet Nadia Vador-Egoti, that you know because for several years now she's been creating a poetic act, 1 minute of dancing per day. 1 minute of dance per day to change the world. And Nadia, in our discussions, meeting with the public, she was talking about this game of with the limits, with being transgressive, and how in her different presentations she integrated and dealt with the spaces transgressing in a demonstration or with the police or in spaces where she was not expected. And I imagine that depending on the spaces that we go through, there is this dimension of a transgressive act. The poetic act becomes transgressive in a society which in a society which excludes it or at least puts it apart. It's interesting to my mind. Could you perhaps react to this dimension of playing with the limits, pushing the limits? Even if it's obvious, I think the body of a dancer in the middle of the flow is already transgressive. We were talking about femininity. It seems that I'm saying that everything is easy, but it's already a strong act of representation when you go on the ground, for example, or talking or reversing representations. You are in a permanent pushing back of the limits, or it depends very much. Dancing in the middle of a demo is in relationship with activism. It's a game at one given time where you push back, at least impose what the story you want to tell, and it's a different layer than saying that you're staying a long time in a given place. You can be kicked out very quickly. I think we can also be kicked out as easily as we can stay a long time. It very much depends on how, what Fouad was saying. It's a statement. What do I want to do there? And that's the first question. I'm going outside. Outside is not inside. I'm at people's place. What am I doing there? Why am I there? And once you have that, you have the forms that appear. The shows we're talking about, site-specific choreography. We're asking ourselves, what is the formal answer? And yeah, it could be a claim, wanting to be arrested, to be stopped, or disappearing. There can be a lot of different relationships in this question of being transgressive. I think you've said everything. For me, it's exactly the same thing.
Well, in fact, it reminds me of a project that done in 2013 with the Lebanese choreographer Dalia Naous. It was called the choreography. It's a choreography. It's a choreography. So like a choreography of Cairo, kind of. And the work was it was working on the personal space. According to the city and the society, there is no personal space there. Like once when we did it again in Germany, it was too much personal there, so we changed everything. But in Cairo, it's a video dance. It was a video work, but it was discreet. Everything was like there is no cameras, and we built a solo, like with an imaginary line of your personal space, and then in the studio, and then you go to the street and you adapt it in the middle of the crowd. And so it was a bit like that. And there was an action, for example, for a girl in the middle of like a bus station. And at this moment, 2013, it was super dangerous, such behavior with a lot of accident of sexual harassment and stuff. So the woman, she was like, she put like a really sexy dress. And the proposition was to ask a guy in the middle of a crowd, she stand alone, asking a guy for a cigarette. It's already a gesture that problematic. And ask another one to light a cigarette, and she smoked the cigarette in the middle of the crowd, and that's it. So that, when you speak to an Egyptian to do such stuff at this moment in this place, it's a kind of suicidal behavior. It's super stupid to do it. But at the end, what was, we were all around filming, with our iPhones and talking and like that. And we were all like prepared for what's going to happen now. But the thing is, it was weird what happened, because Shireen, she was in the middle of the crowd. There is a circle around her, empty circle, and everyone were looking at her like shocked. And really they were avoiding to look at her. So it built this kind of imaginary borderline around her, just with this shocking action at this place. So that it was like for me, it was like a very strong statement at this moment.
This idea of presence that you were talking about, the idea of deciding to be there, you can, I noticed this in solos that we were doing and shooting. We were working with a dancer that was a female dancer starting with us. It was in Casablanca, in an immense empty space, a refused space. She had very little interaction with the space, and the children invaded her because there was not this position that was making a statement, a weird statement, si bizarre, qu'il y avait a distance that was operating in an immense field. Nobody approached her because he was too crazy. He was too much. He was too integrated to this wasteland, and all that created a spectator space, a public space. So it was I see the images of that moment, but facing, you were saying this about transgressing, but facing this situation without arrogance, without violence, but being there creates a space. Yesterday we were talking about situations like that, which created problems for the artist or the organizer. But there's also, of course, we must keep in mind the organizer. We accompany the artists in their projects, and sometimes there are constraints, limits, taking risks. Of course, we've got to negotiate all the time during the residence. It's also with the organizers and trying to move the limits in a context which is particularly tense, which is public space. Especially now, some of the approaches, we will encourage them. We will follow with curiosity the reactions of the public, but we will also use some pedagogy, some teaching approaches for a public that will discover for the first time contemporary dancing. And I think there is also a work of taking into account all these factors. All of these approaches, I think, are both interesting, and you, as we organizers, are aware of this. I think that the presence of a choreographic gesture in site-specific situations is already a political act, and it's a permanent negotiation. Other questions? Hello. Thank you, first of all, for the sharing, the cross-sharing of your experiences. I see that you have a relationship, all three of you, a different relationship to public spaces. And we could add also Nadia Vadori-Gauthier, who has a different way of occupying space. What I would like to know is know more about the creative source of your projects. Is this project going to come to life with the desire to be inspired by a place, or is it the site, the meeting that can be the source of inspiration, in the sense that are you going to create a work that can be shown in different places, or is it going to be readapted, or will they be specific dancing times in an urban space, or how does the project come to life? I know it's very different than what I've heard so far. For my part, it's a question that I ask myself in the coming days for the work that we're developing right now, which is more residential creation in spaces. And after that, is the piece generally I let myself communicate with a space. I say to the dancers, it's not dancing in a space, but making the space, let the space inspire you, make you dance. It's not unique, it cannot move, so the idea to have residences is to let people come and see several times on site. That's, for me, the idea of inviting people to regularly come and see the show in the space. For example, in the residences that we're launching right now, it's to offer to the artist to look for spaces for him or her to create at home, not necessarily recreate the same space, but how to adapt it to a different context. In my village, there are spaces that you find more or less for example, in Bobo Dioulasso, that you find in Benin or in Tanzania. They are not directly the same spaces, but there are sensations which are similar, automatically similar everywhere. These sensations, these elements are elements that you can find in these spaces. They cannot be identical, but that you can also find in other spaces, so you can represent the piece and adapt it to another space. For a long time, what happens in the street is our source of inspiration. We don't necessarily look for a theme to develop. On the other hand, we were talking about permanent creation, but in fact, the more we have projects in specific contexts, in fact, these contexts bring to life, bring to the surface. They're not reconsidered during the moment of creation, but maybe they will be subject to another creation later. These last 10 years, we've enormously worked abroad in foreign countries, in spaces that are very different than what we were accustomed to, far less in festivals, in these fake public spaces, in festivals, in moments actually purely incredible, where we eliminated the question of the public, which eliminates the question of a specific space, because the public is a real constraint to go there, have access or have authorizations. And it's true that all the work that we do gives more and more the wish to create a sort of repertoire of experiences which are subjects of creation not yet developed, but much more than the invitation of a programmer or rehearsal time in a specific place, which is not at all designed for to be the place for a show. All this interacts, and we progress in creation processes which are where we follow the research more than we establish a subject towards which we work. It's what we were saying since 2004. That's how we progress, how we work, with this desire to be. But on the other hand, there's a lot of transmission which is required for new dancers, because the last creation we did is the first creation where we were working with Fouad, but because all the experience we had in Alexandria, this history, the story that we were sharing but not sharing, made it very logic to be working together. But I don't know if what I'm saying is very clear, but what I want to say is that the space creates the subject, but also is disturbing, and there's a part which is unachieved, which is the next subject of creation. I don't know if it's clear enough. Unfortunately, we're going to have to sign off our exchange. I'm sorry, I would have, but unfortunately, we have this time constraint. We have 1 minute left, so I don't know if I'd like to take this time to give my thanks to the organizers of this meeting, the city of Belfort, the DRAC of Bourgogne Franche-Comté. I will also thank Ayla Fatoumi and Eric Lamoureux of the Center, Lucin and Anis Péquignot, and also we want to thank John Burnap, who is our translator today. And I think that this meeting now continues with a shared practice. For those happy few who are with us on site today, I want to thank you all. I wish you all the best for your projects, and I hope that long time will be the new direction of our political, of our cultural policies. Thank you all. Goodbye.